Hello, Paul here. It's July 16th, 2023, and I'm doing a video today on weeds and pests. So, get my notes here. Um, Many of you know that growing a garden can be an extremely rewarding and wonderful thing, helping your health, helping all the people that eat the food that you grow. And there's so many benefits to having a garden, but there's something that we come across very early in the Bible in Genesis chapter 3 about the challenges of growing a garden. And this is from the curse that was put on mankind from Adam and Eve. And it says in Genesis 3, verse 17, after he is sort of pronouncing sentence on Adam and Eve for their crimes, he says, to Adam, he said, "Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food, until you return to the ground from which you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return." And so we see two things here, that it's really through painful toil that we get our food from the ground. And I'm scratching right here, and that's because a bug bit me. And I'm scratching quite a lot, in various spots of my body because chiggers or mosquitoes or ants. We have fire ants now in Nashville, Tennessee, and I like to garden barefoot and with no shirt on, and just like a magnet for pest attacks. And so it's challenging. So it is painful. Being in a garden and working, it's painful. During the sowing time and the harvesting time, and even in between, it's hard. It's really hard work. But the rewards are just unbelievable because all the food we have in our food supplies are sterilized. And what's happening is people's health is breaking down because they don't have the gut flora that they need to have to turn the food into nutrition. There's organisms in our gut called probiotics that we get from the soil. And that makes sense because God created man from the dust of the earth, and the same organisms that work in the soil to help the plants work in our gut to help us. And it makes perfect sense when you start to delve into the science of this. It's totally fascinating and totally just faith building because God said it right in the beginning, when He created man from the dust of the earth, and in the soil we see all this microbiology, and now science is starting to catch up to the microbiology in our guts. That's really what does the heavy lifting and giving us the nutrition that we need. So I'm working from notes today. I'm trying to be thorough, and I've learned a lot about weed and pest control over the last 20-something years I've had this garden here, and you can watch my other videos if you want to see like garden reports. But here's one of our best pest deterrents coming right up now. Yes, you can see my cat. Can you see her? So this cat, it's funny she should show up right now. She wants to be front and center. But this cat just, there's a roof over me that overlooks the garden, and she sits up there about 12 feet high. It's just right up here. And I opened a window so she can go up there, and she just patrols. And she just sits there and waits for rats and moles and mice and rabbits and squirrels, and she's on it. A cat is just a great pest control. A dog is a really good form of pest control for deer. But my dog's very old. She just walked by right as I was starting the video. But a dog, they're wonderful. To cheer the heart in the garden. They're so cute, and but they like to treat my garden as a bathroom, and that's when it gets kind of ugly. Get out of here when you're going to do that kind of thing. They're not allowed to do that, but they try, and especially the cat when it's loose soil, and she's just like, "Oh yeah, this is great." Not my garden, you don't. But the cat and the dog are wonderful, and we have chickens over here. You can probably hear the chickens going, and they eat a lot of ticks and a lot of bugs, but I don't like them in the garden at certain times when I've just planted things because they like to dig. And so, but as far as growing a great garden and having a lot of really great food, and when you have a great garden, you have tons of food. I mean, like this garden produces, maybe 10,000 pounds of food this year is what I'm thinking we'll produce. And in years past, it's been less, but it's been several thousand pounds of food. And it's just amazing that you're always giving things away. It's just like, it's a great thing to always be giving. We're always around people that are always taking. They're the vampires in the room. They're the suction's on when they're around. They always want something from you. But it's great to be able to have community where you're always giving to other people. That's a really beautiful thing, and that's one of the things that the garden is good for. You're not only giving away food, you're giving away seeds, you're giving away nutritional advice, groceries, if they take something home. But you're giving away inspiration, because when you work in a garden, you get very healthy. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. You're in the sun, you're in the fresh air, you're in a very peaceful place, so you have certain peace comes over you when you're in the garden, because you're seeing God provide, abundantly, and you see His provision, and it's very faith building, and it just takes away a lot of the fears that we carry around with us, because of the scarcity that's sort of in our society. But but you have to kill the weeds to have food, and this is really a challenge. God said there are thistles will come out of the ground, thorns and thistles, and you get a lot of this stuff. You get a lot of really nasty weeds that come in and make it not fun. And usually by mid-July, which is what we're in now, in the beginning when I first started gardening, I was totally demoralized at this point. I mean, the weeds had won. It was over. I was discouraged, and it was really tough, and I would give up. And I wouldn't have much food, and I'd just sort of sit on the couch and eat my junk food and get really fat. That's what I used to do. And I've lost 80 pounds, and I'm feeling good. I'm a lot more active and a lot more helpful around the house and with my family and with people that I know and love. I'm able to give a lot more, and that's a beautiful thing. I can hear a string trimmer going in the background. What beautiful choreography. I planned it that way. All right, so we have a sort of a volunteer garden here. People come in and volunteer. But when it gets really hot, the volunteers sort of drop off. And so it's up to me to break the back of the weeds. And so after years of failure and struggles and trials, and I'm older now, I started doing this, I was 40 or something, or so, 38 or something. And now I'm 61, so I've got to be smarter. I can't, and I can't rely on the volunteers. Dealing with the weeds, that's my job. And so, and we get a lot of pests in the garden. See these rabbits here? These big rabbits, they come in. This is the wife rabbit. And coming and stealing my food. What did you take out of the garden?
I got a zucchini.
Oh, a zucchini. Yeah, come in front and talk to the people about what you got out of the garden. There weren't any weeds out there, were there?
I picked a few weeds.
Oh, good, yeah. So you make them pick a few weeds.
And then some kale, some
okra, yep.
And what's under the
some
tomatoes?
Basil. And tomatoes.
Basil.
Yeah, she did well. Yeah. She did well. I'm just working on weeds here. So what are weeds? Okay, weeds are plants out of place. Weeds are really sent, I believe, by God to fix what is broken in the soil. So if you have disturbed soil, you're going to get things like yellow dock and dandelion. So what happens is they come and they build houses and they run these bulldozers over things and these steamrollers, and they churn up the soil, and they bring all the rocky bits from the bottom up to the top, and then all these people that I know, they come to my place and they see I have alluvial bottom soil. I'm in a floodplain. It's gorgeous, so we're so blessed. And they just drool over my soil. Like, oh, your soil's so good. And it's because their soil's been disturbed. And my soil gets disturbed too, and there are parts that are disturbed. And but the weeds are there for a purpose. They're telling you what is broken in the soil. And the weeds are telling a story. They're telling you, if you get these weeds like dandelions and yellow dock that are drilling straight down, they're telling you have a compaction problem in your soil. So you know that, and they're telling you what you need to do to the garden. Now, some weeds taste good. Okay, a lot of weeds that, they're not bad. Like dandelion is supposed to be incredibly curative for various diseases. It's supposed to help the liver. and your liver is what is a big part of your immune system. It's cleaning out all that toxicity. And so some weeds are very good, like lemon sorrel it looks like a clover. I thought it was a clover, but it's a very lemony tasting, nice, zesty sort of thing. And I'll weed it. I'll be pulling weeds and I'll eat some of them. Not yellow dock. What's another good weed? Lamb's quarter, or also known as wild spinach. That's a great weed. It's great to eat. I made the mistake of planting it in a particular place where I was going to cultivate next year, and it just takes over. So you don't want to plant these things in your garden. But some of the weeds taste better than the crops that I grow. And it's humbling, honestly. Here I am doing all this work, and then this weed over here tastes great, like lamb's quarter tastes much better than what stuff I grow. And it grows so readily, too. It's just so well suited. And that's sort of the nature of a weed. Oh, Jerusalem artichoke is another sort of invasive that if you put in your garden, it will just sort of take over. It loves loose soil, but it's a great tasting weed. It grows a bulb that you can harvest in the dead of winter and just have great food all year round. But weeds are very well suited for the garden and for the environment that we're in. And so they grow prolifically, and they're hard to kill and they're hard to slow down. Some of the most wanted list would be Bermuda grass. So Bermuda grass has a job. Its job is to cover bare soil. So if you till something and it's bare, that Bermuda grass is going to come in with a vengeance. But that Bermuda grass, if there are other plants there, it will not come in. It will not be able to go. It only works on bare soil. And so you learn the behavior of the weeds and why they're there. Some of the other ones are nutgrass is another really tough one lately. Pigweed. Then there's henbit. There's in the spring. There's lots of things that are out there, and they're different in every area. So the next section here is when to weed. When do you want to weed? So you want to weed after it rains. Okay, that's the best time to weed because you don't need to water because the rains have already happened and the soil is really soft. You can just sort of pull those suckers right out of there. And those deep-rooted weeds that just pop right out, and they make a nice little sound when they do sometimes. And the roots crack, and you just pull them out. It feels so good. But you can really pull them out quickly after a good rain. And you also want to weed after your crops present themselves. Okay, so let me tell you what that means. So you plant a row of, say, lettuce. Okay, and then you start seeing things come up, but they're the weeds. So you wait for your lettuce to come up. And you can see it, so it's presenting itself is what we call it. Fancy term there, yeah. And then you pull the weeds, and you'll see them out of the row. And another thing I like to do, I'm getting out of order here. So after the crops present themselves, that's when you want to weed in a particular area, and then you want to weed frequently as opposed to infrequently. So if you wait too long, the weeds grow exponentially. So that between day 0 and day 10, they've grown a little bit, but between day 10 and day 20, they've grown 10 times as much. Something like that. So you want to get them quicker than later. So after a rain, you'll see all these little weeds starting to pop up, and then that's when you go after it. And there are some weeds you go after harder than others. Like some weeds I don't worry about. Like if nutgrass is coming in underneath squash, I know that squash will take care of all the sunlight and it will choke off the nutgrass. But when I see like Bermuda grass coming in to like a lettuce bed or something like that, I really take notice and I really go after that hard because I know that's going to ruin the crop. And so you learn a lot of this from experience. You learn a lot of it from defeat. And that's one of the things about gardening. I'm not a really good gardener, but when I get something that works, I just repeat it and get better and better at it. And so most of my gardening experiences are huge failures. I know that's not inspiring. Maybe it is inspiring because it's not like I learned this from my grandmother or something. She would have loved to have taught me, but they were already, she was working in a factory by the time I was born, and she didn't. She didn't have time with me out in the garden, and maybe that'll change. I just became a grandfather, and so maybe I'll have my daughter out in the garden. My granddaughter out in the garden doing weeding, and she'll learn these kinds of things. But the video is a great way to show. And I've only learned a little bit in 20 years. Imagine what my great grandfather, when he died, what he knew. From just standing on the shoulders of his father and his father's father, and all that information getting passed down. But now we have these amazing tools, and I'm going to talk about that also. But number 4 on when to weed is 5:15 in the morning. Yeah, I kid you not. So at 5:15, the sun's coming up. It's beautiful. The birds are starting to chirp. Everything's quiet. There's not much road noise. The airplanes haven't really started yet. And it's just gorgeous out here. It's cool. It's about 65 to 70 degrees, and even in the heat of the summer. And that's the best time to come out. So I know it's a sacrifice. You might have to take a nap later on in the day. You might have a job and you might have to get to bed at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock to do that. But I guarantee you it's worth it. That's a beautiful time. And that's a very peaceful time. A couple of things that we get out of the garden besides the food is the peace. There's a lot of peace knowing that your food is going to be provided for out of thin air by God. And there's just a lot of, it just takes away a lot of fear and a lot of worry, because wherever you end up, you can just start cultivating something and something will happen, and you know that. And you have that that competency and that confidence. And then, just the peace and quiet in the morning is just very, very good for the soul. And then the exercise, of course, is very good, gentle exercise, as my father used to say. It's good, gentle exercise. It's not like, what I'm going to be playing soccer here in an hour or two, and that's not going to be gentle. That's going to be rough. And I could get hurt, but in the garden I'm a lot less likely to get hurt. So that's it for when to weed. Now, the next section is preparing the fight. What you need to fight. And so I will take the camera off of the stand here. Well, I'll explain it first. So what you want is you want straight rows. So I take a string, I put in a stake on one end of the row, I put a stake in the other end of the row, I pull a string, and then I take my rake and I draw a line. And that's where that row is going to be, perfect line. And that may seem like I'm being a Nazi or I'm being, fussy, but that makes a big difference when you're running equipment up and down. You'll see why later. A straight row really makes a big difference. And then you want a flat surface, so you don't want bumps and undulations, because that's where the weeds like to hide. And like around fences, like I like to have my fences, like I have a welded wire fence to keep the deer up. And 6-foot welded wire fence, 2x4-inch squares. But I like to keep a little bit at the bottom so I can get the string trimmer under there. If you don't do that, everything just grows up. And it's really bad. So some of the fences that I haven't left that gap, I have to go and cut them with a blade. Put a blade on the weed whacker and just go and slice those metal fences, and then cut out the little bit at the bottom. So I've learned a lot of things the hard way. And a third thing that I do, another thing is, when I'm running the tractor, a lot of times when I take a turn with the tractor, it'll leave a big furrow, and so I have to rake all those down, because that's where the weeds like to hide, and you can't get the rakes and the equipment over it later on. And then another thing I like to do is not plant plants in the garden that will go crazy, like fenugreek, Jerusalem artichokes, what's the other one? The wild spinach, what is it called? I had it up here. I've got it. Lamb's quarter. Yeah, don't plant those in the garden. They will take over. And then another thing I like to do is a lot of my field, I don't plow or I don't mow at all. And I let it grow up. It grows up 10, 15 feet sometimes, 8 feet. These huge weeds growing up all over my property. And it might drive the neighbors crazy, but those animals, that's what they like to eat. So when I watch the rabbit and the deer, they're not in my garden. They're out there on the perimeter of my garden, eating all the things that are their natural foods. So you don't want to mow everything. So, if you mow the whole place and then you put this little garden up in the middle, you're sending like a gift certificate to the deer and the squirrels and the rabbits. Oh, come, this is your food. And they don't have any of their food, and they're going to eat your food. And my neighbors mow all their lawns. And these are big acred lots here, and they mow them, really short. And so what happens is all the deer and all the animals come to my place. And so, and a lot of my friends just tell me, oh, my squirrels ate my cherry tomatoes. They ate this, they ate that. And it's like, well, what did you leave for them, It's kind of like, if, it's like if you leave a piece of cake in the refrigerator, don't expect to come back and see it, If it's just a little piece. If it's a big piece, you might get a little, but not that I'm eating cake in the fridge, out of the fridge, but because one of the things about getting on in the garden is you start eating really healthy food, and then some of that junk food, you just can't take it anymore because your body's just like, yeah, we want this, And one of the greatest things that I started doing was eating out of the garden, and that didn't take place till about 15 years after I had a garden. I was just still eating my junk food and growing wonderful food and going, look at my wonderful food. But it's very important to start eating the food from the garden. And when you do, you won't want, you won't want those potato chips in a can. You won't want the microwave popcorn, and that stuff will be gone. You won't believe you were eating that at one point, because you'll be so much healthier and so much more nourished. It's very nutrient-dense food coming out of a garden, especially when it has all the organisms on it, and you haven't washed it with chlorinated water and killed everything that's going to do you some good. Okay, so leave the animals their food. Okay, now this is the part you probably wanted to see for a long time, the tools. Okay, so I'm going to take you around and show you the tools. We have a lot of tools in the garden. Okay, these are about 100 yards away, so I'm going to walk over there. So if you have a tractor, that's a really good thing. And you don't have to own a tractor. You can borrow a tractor. You can pay someone who has a tractor. And so one of the best things to have with the tractor is a mower. So you don't want to go in and, like, say you got some high weeds, and you don't want to go in and just till those under. You got to cut them off. You got to rake off the dead bodies and put them in a compost or put them somewhere. And so I'll show you the different mowers and the different implements that we use. So I guess the first thing you come after it with is a bush hog. And so that's down here. So that, my friends, that orange thing is a bush hog. And it'll cut down 2-inch trees, and it'll do a lot of damage. So that's the first thing you come in. And then maybe after that you could use a finish mower. And that's this orange thing right here. That's a finish mower. And so once you get all that stuff off, you cut it all the way down to the soil, you're ready to go into it with a tiller. Now the best way to do a garden is not to till. The best way is to sheet mulch, where you just put layers of wood chips and leaves. But we haven't been able to do that with my travel schedule and with the Bermuda grass here, so we are tilling. But if you can get to a non-till situation like Paul Gauchi's Garden of Eden, that's the best thing. But until we get there, this is what we use. And this is a tiller. And so it's a 7-foot tiller. That's the business end of it there. And it does a wonderful job. And so I can go into an area and just hit it with the bush hog and then knock it down, and then get the stumps out with the tractor with the front end, and then so we can take basically any ground and make it produce, and that's a really good thing. And so you might not have access to a tractor, but for those that do, for those that don't, you can get a walk behind tiller, and I'll show you. I have one for the tight areas, and I'll show that to you. It's right here. So I'm into cordless equipment. I'm good at mechanical stuff. I'm good at changing the oil and changing the air filters, but I spend a lot of time. It's very time consuming. So I've gone electric, and I've gone to cordless equipment. So this is a cordless Ryobi It's a walk behind rear tine tiller. So the battery goes in here, and then you walk behind it here, and it's one tough cookie. It'll get through stuff. So if you don't have a tractor, you can get a lot of different walk behinds. There's some big ones that you can get that also mow, and you can put different attachments on it. There's different platforms out there. But the ones that we really use a lot here, well, first I'll show you the hand tools. Because you know the best tool for weeding is really your hands. Eye-hand coordination is just an amazing thing. You reach in and you just pop them out after a good rain, and that's good for getting around the plants. But getting up and down the aisles is a little different. But I use a lot of hand tools, and I make my own hand tools. It's something I do enjoy doing in my wood shop, and so I'll show you some of the things I've made. Let's get set up here. Okay, it's wanting to tip over, but so one of the great tools that I use is just a leaf rake. Okay, and so this is really good for just pulling the dead weeds out, and for moving soil, flattening areas. It's surprisingly useful. I use it a lot. Another thing is a dirt rake right here, and this is good for leveling the ground and making contours where you need contours, like you want to dig out a row or you want to put a furrow up. A lot of times, like in the spring and the fall, I'll plant in a mound. It's like a row, but it's a mound. It's called a furrow. And then in the summer, when it's dry, I go below grade. So I'll dig out a trench, really. And then another tool, this one I made, is this is just a piece of like construction material. They use them in foundations, I guess. And I just mounted it to a pole. I make these dowels in my wood shop. And then it just has a flat scraper, and it's really good for getting those baby weeds after a rain. So I go out there with that, and it's like sweeping the floor. And then I use the baby rake too, and that I use to get in like a small row or in a small area where I can't get in with the bigger rake. And so those tools are really good, and so I use them a lot. And so they're, you know, it's hard on the upper body. And a lot of times when I'm hand weeding, I have one of them in my hand, and I lean on it like a cane, and that helps my back. Because, you know, backs get sore in this business, folks. So we need to keep our backs rested and keep them from getting really tight. So now I'll show you some of the other tools. These are power tools. So this is a really great tool right here. I don't know how far out you can see. I'll point it down here. So this is a quarter